Crazy dog lady. That's what she is. 3 German Shepherds, and she can't keep them quiet for 5 minutes. Some of us have property values to protect. I didn't look up from clipping the lead onto Kaiser's harness. My hand stayed steady. My breathing stayed even. The same way they did when I worked a vehicle checkpoint outside Bagram with nothing between me and a car bomb, but 70 pounds of fur and 4 years of trust. Ken Whitmore was still talking. He'd been talking for 6 minutes, I knew, because Kaiser's ear had twitched exactly twice per minute since he started, and Kaiser only twitched when noise exceeded acceptable operational parameters. If you've ever been judged by someone who has no idea what they're looking at, hit that subscribe button. My name is Brenda Halloway. I'm 54 years old. And up until 3 weeks ago, I was living quietly at the end of Maple Creek Lane with my 3 German Shepherds, a small pension, and absolutely no intention of explaining myself to anyone. Now I'm standing in my own driveway while my neighbor waves an HOA violation notice like it's a warrant for my arrest. Funny how things change. I retired from the United States Air Force 11 years ago. Technical sergeant, 13 years of service, 4 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars that sit in a shoebox in my closet because I never found a wall that felt right for them. But Ken doesn't know that. Ken knows that I walk my dogs at 6 in the morning. Ken knows that Kaiser sometimes barks at squirrels. Ken knows that I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck and wear the same canvas jacket every day, regardless of weather. Ken has decided this is enough information to form a complete picture. You realize there are ordinances, he said, stepping closer to my fence line. His polo shirt was the color of key lime pie. His khakis had a crease sharp enough to cut paper. 3 dogs, 3. The limit is 2 per household. Kaiser is a service animal, I said. My voice didn't waver. It never did anymore. Service animal? He laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind of laugh people use when they've already decided you're lying. For what? Loneliness? I clipped the second lead onto Rhea. She sat perfectly still, her eyes tracking Ken's hands the way she'd once tracked insurgent movement through a poppy field in Helmand province. Something like that, I said. The 3rd dog, Odin, pressed against my leg. He was the oldest, 11 years, gray around his muzzle now, but his nose was still the sharpest thing I'd ever worked with. Sharper than any technology, sharper than any machine. In 2014, that nose found 14 pounds of TATP packed into a drainage culvert 200 meters from a forward operating base. 63 service members were sleeping in those barracks, but Ken didn't know that. Ken saw an old dog with bad hips. I'm taking this to the board, Ken said. I've documented everything, the barking, the smell, the fact that you let them run off leash in your own backyard like this is some kind of kennel. My backyard is fenced. The fence is 2 inches below regulation height. I almost smiled. Almost. I'll look into that, I said. He wasn't finished. Ken was never finished. I'd lived next to him for 7 years, and in that time, I'd learned that Ken measured his own importance by the volume of his complaints. He'd reported Mrs. Patterson for her garden gnomes. He'd called code enforcement on the Delgados for painting their shutters the wrong shade of gray. He'd once threatened to sue a 12-year-old for leaving a bicycle on the sidewalk. Ken Whitmore had opinions about everything and expertise in nothing. You know what your problem is, he said, leaning over my fence now, his face reddening in the morning sun. You think the rules don't apply to you. You think because you're some kind of, dog trainer, dog walker, that you can do whatever you want. I'm retired, I said. Retired from what? Collecting strays? I didn't answer. I hadn't answered that question in 11 years. Not to neighbors. Not to the woman at the grocery store who asked why I flinched at fireworks. Not to the VA counselor who wanted me to talk about what happened in Kandahar. Some things don't translate into civilian language. The dogs knew. That was enough. Growing up in Chilton, Wisconsin, I was the girl who preferred the barn to the house. My father raised dairy cattle. My mother taught third grade. My older brother Danny played football and dated cheerleaders and got a scholarship to Madison. I trained the farm dogs. It wasn't a skill anyone valued. It was just something I did while everyone else was doing something that mattered. Danny got trophies. I got muddy boots and a collie named Shep, who could move 40 head of cattle with a single look. When I enlisted at 19, my father shook my hand like I was a stranger. My mother cried. Danny said, "The military? Really, Bren? You couldn't just get married like a normal person?" I didn't explain. I never explained. I tested into the military working dog program at Lackland 6 months later. Highest aptitude score in my class. By the time I was 23, I was running detection operations in Kuwait. By 28, Afghanistan. But when I came home for Christmas in 2009, my mother introduced me to the neighbors as our daughter who works with animals. Not wrong, not right either. I became the story they could tell without having to understand. The quiet one, the one who never married, the one who moved away and came back strange. When Odin and I found that culvert bomb in Kandahar, I didn't call home to tell them. When I got my second Bronze Star, I didn't mention it. When I retired with a medical discharge and a letter from the base commander calling me one of the finest handlers in Air Force history, I packed it in a box with everything else and drove to a small house on Maple Creek Lane where no one knew my name. 11 years. 11 years of walking my dogs at dawn. 11 years of nodding at neighbors and declining invitations and keeping my grass cut to regulation height. They saw what they wanted to see. Ken saw a crazy dog lady. The Hendersons saw a recluse. The mailman saw someone who never got packages. They didn't see the scars on my forearms from a handler who lost control in a kenneling accident. They didn't see the way I still slept with a flashlight within arm's reach. They didn't see the photo in my bedside drawer of a 19-year-old German shepherd named Duke who died in my arms on an airstrip in Bagram while mortar fire shook the tarmac. They didn't ask. I didn't offer. "I want those dogs gone by the end of the month," Ken said. He was pointing at me now. Finger extended, shaking slightly. "Or I'm calling animal control. I'm calling the police. I'm calling everyone I have to call until someone makes you comply." I looked at him, really looked. The polo shirt, the khakis, the soft hands that had never held anything more dangerous than a 9-iron. "You do what you need to do, Ken. You think you're above this, don't you?" His voice cracked. "You think you're special. Walking around here like you own the place, like you're better than everyone else." Kaiser shifted beside me. Not aggressive, alert. The way he got when he sensed a threat I couldn't see yet. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I said. "I just don't think about you at all." That was the wrong thing to say. Ken's face went from red to purple. His hand moved toward his pocket. For 1 second, one fraction of a second, my body did what it had been trained to do. Weight shifted, hands ready, eyes on his center mass. Then he pulled out his phone. "That's it," he said. "I'm documenting this. Verbal harassment, threatening behavior. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." He snapped a photo, then another. Then he turned on his heel and marched back toward his house, already dialing someone. I stood in my driveway with 3 dogs who had saved more lives than Ken would ever know existed. And I waited. Because I knew something Ken didn't know, couldn't know. Tomorrow morning there would be a convoy, black SUVs, official plates, men and women in uniforms that Ken had only ever seen on television. They wouldn't be coming for him, they'd be coming for me. The phone call came at 4 in the morning. I was already awake. I'm always awake at 4. The dogs know this. They don't stir anymore when I sit up in the dark and listen to the house settle around me. They just breathe, steady, patient, waiting for whatever comes next. The number on the screen was blocked. I answered anyway. Sergeant Halloway. Not a question, a statement. Speaking. This is Lieutenant Colonel Vance, Joint Regional Task Force. We have a situation developing. Incredible threat. High-density target. Local K-9 units are stretched thin, and we need specialized detection capability. I was already standing, already moving toward the closet where I kept my go bag. 11 years of retirement, and I still kept a go bag. Timeline? Immediate. Convoy will be at your location in 40 minutes. Bring Odin. The line went dead. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Credible threat. High-density target, specialized detection. Those words meant one thing. Someone had intelligence about an explosive device, and they didn't trust machines to find it. They trusted a nose. I dressed in the dark, canvas pants, boots I'd kept oiled for a decade, the same jacket I wore every day, the one Ken thought made me look like a vagrant. What he didn't know was that jacket had been through 4 deployments. The patches had been removed, the insignia stripped, but the fabric still held the smell of aviation fuel and desert sand. Kaiser watched me from his bed. Rhea lifted her head, but Odin was already at the door, his tail low and steady, his eyes sharp despite the gray around his muzzle. He knew. He always knew. One more time, old man, I said quietly. His tail wagged once, just once. At 4:42, I heard the vehicles, 3 of them. Black SUVs with government plates moving down Maple Creek Lane like sharks through still water. They stopped in front of my house. No sirens, no lights, just the quiet efficiency of people who did this work without needing an audience. I walked out with Odin at my side, his lead loose in my hand. A woman in tactical dress stepped out of the lead vehicle. Captain's bars, sharp eyes, the kind of posture that said she'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. Sergeant Halloway? That's me. She looked at Odin. Really looked, not the way Ken looked, seeing an old dog with bad hips. She saw the scars on his left ear where shrapnel had grazed him in Helmand. She saw the way he held himself coiled and ready despite his age. He's the one from Kandahar, she said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am. The culvert bomb. Yes, ma'am. She nodded once. Then let's move. I was climbing into the vehicle when I heard it. Ken's front door opening. His voice, high and indignant, cutting through the pre-dawn silence. What the hell is going on here? Do you people know what time it is? There are noise ordinances. He stopped. I watched through the tinted window as he took in the scene. The black SUVs, the armed personnel, the woman with captain's bars who had turned to face him with an expression that could freeze water. Sir, I need you to return to your residence. I live here. I have a right to know what's happening on my own street. That woman, he pointed at the SUV, at me. That woman has been a problem for years. If this is about her dogs, I have documentation. I have... Sir. The captain's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Return to your residence. Now. Ken's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She's just a dog trainer, he said weakly. She walks dogs, that's all she does. The captain didn't answer. She simply turned and walked back to the vehicle, leaving Ken standing on his lawn in his bathrobe, watching the convoy pull away. I didn't look back. The briefing happened in the vehicle. Stadium event. 40,000 attendees expected. Intelligence suggested a device had been planted somewhere in the structure within the last 72 hours. Chemical signature consistent with TATP, the same compound Odin had found in that culvert 11 years ago. Local units swept the facility twice, the captain said. Nothing, but the intelligence is solid. Someone's either moved the device or concealed it beyond standard detection range. What's the target profile? Political. Governors attending. 2 senators. Local law enforcement brass. High value, high visibility. I looked at Odin. He was sitting calmly between my knees. His head turned toward the captain as if he understood every word. Maybe he did. How long do we have? Event starts at noon. We need clearance by 10. 5 hours. 5 hours to search a stadium that covered 18 acres. 5 hours to find something that professional teams had already missed twice. Odin can do it, I said. The captain nodded. That's why you're here. We arrived at the stadium at 5:15. The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky, turning the massive structure into a gray silhouette against the horizon. Police vehicles lined the perimeter. Officers in tactical gear moved in coordinated patterns. Radios crackled with coded transmissions, and standing at the entrance, surrounded by a cluster of brass and suits, was a man I recognized from television. Police Commissioner David Chen, silver hair, square jaw, the kind of face that belonged on recruitment posters. He saw the SUV pull up, saw me step out with Odin, and then he did something that made every officer in the vicinity stop what they were doing. He walked toward me, not toward the captain, not toward the tactical team, toward me, a 54-year-old woman in a canvas jacket with a gray muzzled dog. Sergeant Halloway? He extended his hand. I shook it. Commissioner, I've read your file. His voice was quiet, respectful. Kandahar, 2014, 14 pounds of TATP in a drainage culvert, 63 personnel in the blast radius. 63, I confirmed. And this is him? He looked at Odin. This is the dog? Yes, sir. The commissioner crouched down. Not the way civilians crouch around dogs, all condescension and baby talk. He crouched the way you crouch in front of a colleague, an equal. I served 2 tours in Iraq, he said quietly, his hand resting on Odin's shoulder. I know what these dogs do. I know what their handlers do. And I know that most people will never understand. Odin's tail moved, slow, deliberate, the acknowledgement of one soldier to another. The commissioner stood. Around us, the officers had gone still, silent, watching something they didn't quite understand but recognized as significant. We have a problem, Sergeant, a big one. We've swept this facility twice with our best teams, and we found nothing, but the threat is real. I can feel it. What do you need from me, sir? I need a nose I can trust. He glanced at Odin. The best nose in the business from what I understand. He's older now, slower, but still sharp. I thought of the way Odin had known this morning before I even answered the phone, the way he'd been at the door before I finished dressing, the way his eyes still held that quiet intensity that had saved my life more times than I could count. Still sharp, I said. Then let's get to work. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. Odin worked methodically, the way he'd always worked, section by section, row by row, his nose close to the ground, then lifting, reading the air the way a scholar reads text. I watched his body language, the set of his ears, the rhythm of his breathing, looking for the subtle shift that meant he'd found something. The stadium was massive, 18 acres of concrete and steel, seats and corridors, storage rooms and utility tunnels. The local teams had focused on the obvious places, the entrances, the main concourse, the areas where crowds would gather. Odin ignored all of it. At 8:47, we reached a maintenance corridor beneath the east stands, a narrow passage that led to an electrical substation. The local teams had checked it, cleared it, moved on. Odin stopped. His body went rigid. His nose pointed toward a section of wall that looked exactly like every other section of wall. Got something, I said into my radio. The captain appeared within minutes, followed by a bomb disposal unit. Here, she looked at the wall. We checked this area 3 times. He's never been wrong. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded to the disposal team. They found it behind a false panel. 32 pounds of TATP wired to a timer set for 12:15. 15 minutes after the governor was scheduled to take the stage. 32 pounds? In a confined space like that maintenance corridor, the blast would have compromised the structural supports for the entire east side of the stadium. 10,000 seats, all occupied. The disposal team worked in silence, their movements precise and careful. I stood with Odin at my side, watching, waiting, breathing. At 9:23, the team leader gave the all clear. Device neutralized, scene secure. Around me, officers exhaled, shoulders dropped, someone laughed nervously, the sound of relief flooding through people who had been holding their breath for hours, but I didn't move. Neither did Odin. Commissioner Chen appeared at my side. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at the space where the bomb had been hidden. 32 pounds, he said finally. Yes, sir. 10,000 people. Yes, sir. He turned to face me. His eyes were wet. Sergeant Halloway, on behalf of the police department, the city, and everyone who would have been in this stadium today, thank you. Don't thank me, I said. Thank him. I looked at Odin. He was sitting now, his breathing slightly labored, his old joints aching from 4 hours of work. But his eyes were bright, proud. The commissioner knelt down again. This time, he placed both hands on Odin's face, the way you hold something precious. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you, soldier. Odin's tail wagged once, twice, and then the commissioner did something I didn't expect. He stood, turned to face the assembled officers, 30 or 40 of them now gathered in that narrow corridor, and he spoke in a voice that carried. This woman and this dog just prevented the worst terrorist attack the city has ever seen. I want everyone here to remember that. Remember what real service looks like. Remember what real courage looks like. He paused. And remember that sometimes heroes don't wear badges or carry guns. Sometimes they wear canvas jackets and walk German shepherds at 6 a.m. He turned back to me. Ma'am, your leash holds back disaster. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing, just stood there with my dog, surrounded by officers who were looking at me differently now. Not with curiosity, not with confusion, with respect. The convoy took us home at 11:30. I sat in the back of the SUV with Odin's head in my lap, his breathing slow and steady. He was exhausted. We both were. But there was a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. The lightness of purpose, of meaning, of being seen. When we turned onto Maple Creek Lane, I noticed the crowd immediately. Neighbors, a dozen of them, maybe more, gathered on the sidewalk in front of my house. News vans, cameras, and Ken. Ken was standing at the front of the crowd, his arms crossed, his face arranged in an expression of righteous vindication. He was talking to a reporter, gesturing toward my house, clearly in the middle of explaining something. The SUVs stopped. The captain stepped out first, then held the door for me. The crowd went quiet. Ken's mouth was still moving, but no sound came out. He was staring at the vehicles, at the armed personnel, at the commissioner himself stepping out of the lead SUV and walking toward my driveway. Sergeant Halloway, the commissioner said loud enough for everyone to hear, the mayor would like to formally recognize your service at a ceremony next week. The governor has also expressed interest in presenting you with a commendation. I heard someone gasp, saw heads turning, saw Ken's face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. Ken started. The commissioner turned to look at him. Just looked, the way a predator looks at something too small to be worth hunting. Ken stopped talking. This woman, the commissioner said, addressing the crowd now, is a retired technical sergeant of the United States Air Force. 13 years of service, 4 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars. And this morning, she and her dog prevented a terrorist attack that would have killed 10,000 people. Silence was absolute. I watched Ken's face, watched the realization dawn, watched his certainty crumble like wet paper. The crazy dog lady, someone whispered, not mockingly, wonderingly. The commissioner extended his hand to me one final time. Sergeant, it has been an honor. I shook his hand, and then I walked past Ken Whitmore without a word, Odin at my side, and went inside my house. Instruction: continue immediately to part 3. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles after storms pass. I filled Odin's water bowl, checked his joints, made sure he had his bed by the window where the morning sun would warm his old bones. Then I sat in my kitchen and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The knock came at 3:15 that afternoon. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Ken Whitmore stood on my porch. His polo shirt was wrinkled now. His khakis had lost their crease. He looked smaller somehow, deflated. I didn't know, he said. I didn't respond. I mean, how was I supposed to know? You never said anything. You never told anyone. You walk your dogs and you keep to yourself, and you never what, Ken? He swallowed. Never explained. I leaned against my doorframe. Odin appeared beside me, his presence steady and warm. Ken's eyes flickered to the dog he'd called a nuisance, the dog he'd threatened to have removed, the dog who had saved 10,000 lives that morning. Let me ask you something, I said. In the 7 years I've lived here, how many times have you asked me about my life? He opened his mouth, closed it. How many times have you asked what I did before I moved here? Where I served? What my dogs are trained for? You didn't ask, Ken. You didn't want answers. You wanted ammunition. His face reddened. That's not fair. You could have said something. You could have told people I don't owe you my story. My voice stayed level. I don't owe you explanations. I don't owe you a performance of my service so you can decide whether I deserve basic respect. The HOA violations were harassment. We both know that. He took a step back. His hands were shaking now, the same hands that had waved that violation notice like a weapon. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the HOA board, I said. Targeted harassment, discriminatory enforcement. I have documentation too, Ken. 7 years of it. Every complaint you filed, every inspection you demanded, every time you stood in my driveway and told me I was worthless. I never said, you said I was a crazy dog lady. You said my dogs were a menace. You said I thought I was better than everyone else. I paused. You were right about one thing. I don't think about you at all. But I kept records anyway. His face went pale. What are you going to do? That depends on you. I watched him calculate, watched him realize that the woman he'd dismissed for 7 years now had the ear of the police commissioner, the governor, the mayor, that his carefully constructed kingdom of complaints and violations meant nothing against the weight of what I'd done that morning. I could apologize, he said weakly. You could. Would that make this go away? I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had measured his importance by making others feel small. This man who had confused volume with authority and complaints with power. No, I said. It wouldn't. I closed the door. 3 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency board meeting. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. The outcome was reported in the local paper. Ken Whitmore had been removed from his position as neighborhood compliance officer. 7 years of complaints were under review. Several families had come forward with their own documentation of harassment. The Pattersons, the Delgados, the family with the 12-year-old who'd left his bicycle on the sidewalk. Ken's reputation, which he'd built on the backs of other people's humiliation, collapsed in a matter of days. I heard he put his house up for sale 2 months later. Couldn't stand the way people looked at him now. couldn't stand the silence that followed him wherever he went. Funny how that works. The ceremony at City Hall was small, tasteful, the kind of event that doesn't make headlines, but means everything to the people in the room. The governor presented me with a commendation. The commissioner spoke about service and sacrifice. The mayor shook my hand and called me a hero. I stood at the podium with Odin at my side and said very little. I'm not good at speeches, I told him. Never have been. But I'll say this. Most people think courage is loud. They think it announces itself. They think it needs applause and recognition and a spotlight. I looked at Odin, at his gray muzzle, his tired eyes, his steady, patient presence. It doesn't. Courage is quiet. It's the work you do when no one's watching. It's the service you give without expecting thanks. It's staying steady when everything around you is falling apart. I paused. My dog taught me that. Every day for 11 years, he taught me that. And I hope I've been a good enough student. Odin's tail wagged. Once, that was enough. After the ceremony, a woman approached me, mid-30s, sharp eyes, the posture of someone who'd seen things. Sergeant Halloway, I'm Major Sarah Whitfield. I run the K-9 training program at Lackland. I know the program. I know you do. She smiled slightly. You hold 3 records that haven't been broken in 20 years. Records don't mean much. They mean something to me, and to the handlers I'm training. She paused. I'd like to offer you a consulting position. Part-time, nothing strenuous. Just passing on what you know to the next generation. I looked at Odin, at this dog who had given everything he had to give. I have conditions, I said. Name them. Odin comes with me. Every day. He's not working anymore, but he deserves to see what his legacy looks like. Major Whitfield nodded. Done. And I want to focus on the handlers, not just the dogs. The bond, the partnership, that's what makes the difference. That's exactly what we need. I shook her hand. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of a training field at Lackland Air Force Base, watching a young handler work with a Belgian Malinois on explosive detection. The dog was eager. The handler was nervous. But there was something there, a connection forming. Odin lay in the shade beside me, his head on his paws, his eyes following the work with the same intensity he'd brought to every mission for 13 years. You see that? I said to the handler, a 22-year-old sergeant named Williams. The way she's reading your body language. She knows you're anxious before you know it yourself. How do I fix that? You don't fix it. You acknowledge it. Your dog isn't looking for you to be perfect. She's looking for you to be honest. Trust the partnership. Trust her nose. Trust yourself. Williams nodded, took a breath, tried again. This time the dog's posture changed, more confident, more focused. The handler had settled and the dog had responded. Better, I said. Much better. I still live on Maple Creek Lane. Same small house, same canvas jacket, same routine of walking my dogs at 6 a.m. But things are different now. The neighbors wave, not because they know what I did. Most of them have already forgotten the headlines, the ceremony, the black SUVs that lined the street that morning. They wave because they see me differently now, not as the crazy dog lady, just as Brenda. Just Brenda. Odin passed in the spring. Quietly, in his sleep, his head on my lap, his breathing slowing until it stopped. I buried him in my backyard, beneath the oak tree where he used to lie in the summer shade. I didn't mark the grave with anything fancy, just a simple stone with his name and 2 words. Good boy, because that's what he was. That's what he always was. I still have Kaiser and Rhea. They're getting older too. Gray around their muzzles, slower on the morning walks. But they still watch me with those steady eyes that say they understand things most humans never will. Last week, a young woman moved into the house next door. the one Ken used to own. She has a Labrador puppy, untrained, loud, constantly getting into trouble. She apologized the first time the puppy ran into my yard. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm still learning he's a handful." I looked at the puppy, looked at her, saw something familiar in her eyes, the same uncertainty I'd felt at 19 when I had first walked into the kennels at Lackland with nothing but a hunch that dogs understood me better than people did. "Come by tomorrow morning," I said. 6 o'clock. I'll show you some basics." She blinked. "Really?" "Really." Because that's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The knowledge gets passed down, handler to handler, dog to dog, generation to generation. Silence isn't weakness, it's patience. It's the understanding that what you know doesn't need applause. It just needs to be ready when it matters. I spent 11 years being invisible, being dismissed, being reduced to a crazy dog lady with too many dogs and not enough explanation. But I was never invisible to the ones who mattered. Not to my dogs, not to the handlers I served with, not to the 63 service members who slept peacefully the night Odin found that culvert bomb in Kandahar. And now, every morning at 6, I walk my dogs down Maple Creek Lane. Same routine, same jacket, same steady pace, but I am no longer a blank space. I am Brenda Halloway, technical sergeant, handler, teacher, and my leash still holds back disaster. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.